Well, let's jump into game one and see if the fan favourite Colossal might be making an appearance or whether it might be sitting on the bench for the time being and just watching some of the other Pokemon action. But no, we wouldn't big up Colossal if it wasn't going to be jumping out into the fray. Colossal and the Dragapult leading out there for Jake, whereas James has gone for the Metagross and the Amoonguss. And you can already see the potential synergy with Colossal and Dragapult. Dragapult known for having Surf so that it can just proc that Steam Engine ability, activate the weakness policy, and make Colossal a really formidable threat. And with two Pokemon on James's side that are weak to fire type attacks with Amoonguss and Metagross, Colossal is looking really, really strong. We just have to watch out for maybe a Max Quake from that Metagross.
Yeah, there's not really too much that you can do if you're James to prevent the potential Surf from the Dragapult to set this Colossal up and then lose your Amoonguss. But James is a very experienced player in himself, as well as the rest of the players in this bracket. He will know what he needs to do in this situation. The Metagross doesn't appear to be in the greatest position right now, but he does have that redirection support from the Amoonguss, and he does, like you say, have that Max Quake that he can use to take advantage and go into that Colossal for some extremely big damage.
Exactly, and of course Amoonguss as well, if it's able to survive out this turn, could always go for something like a Spore and just put that Colossal to sleep, not only obviously negating the kind of threat that it is, but then wasting through Dynamax turns if Jake decides to obviously Gigantamax up the Pokemon. We are going to see Dynamax and Metagross out in the action, and again, this is a Pokemon that loves the Dynamax style format that we've got at the moment. It can Dynamax up, get additional HP, throw on a weakness policy as well, and then Metagross can be such a force to be reckoned with. But of course, back in the action here, Colossal Gigantamax form here for Jake. So really nice fond memories coming back from Players Cup 1 here, and I wonder if it's going to be victorious. Dragapult not going for Surf though, going for a Reflect, so boosting the defenses of Jake's side of the field, which I think are critical when you're facing down against a Metagross that is indeed going for that Max Quake. Targeting down into the Colossal does over 50%, so huge amount of damage here, and of course boosting up the special defense on James's side of the field, and against the Colossal that really is a good sort of defensive boost to have. Activating the weakness policy, however, Steam Engine not going to be activating as it wasn't hit by a fire or water type move, but it does mean the Colossal can fire off the G-Max Volcalith in retaliation with the weakness policy activated, and that's going straight down into the Amoonguss. It's not enough to pick up a KO, however, but it will now cause the rocks to be thrown around, and that residual damage will happen each turn. And Amoonguss actually going to put the Dragapult to sleep and not the Colossal. I mean, if Metagross is going to outspeed the Colossal, then it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and we said prior to coming into this game, you need a way to deal with this potential lead, and I think James has done an extremely good job here with the Metagross here as the lead, going for the Dynamax, and like you've mentioned already, Luke, going for that Max Quake, which gives you the opportunity to get the special defense boost, which then allowed the Amoonguss to actually survive the turn and get the Spore into the Dragapult, which is then shut it down and stop that potential Surf that could come out and cause all sorts of problems, especially going into this next turn. The Metagross is now sitting in a position for James where he's able to go for another Max Quake into the Colossal to remove it from the field and maybe reposition with these Amoonguss, hence the Dragapult being asleep, and maybe get something to help deal with that. Now Jake, on the other hand, is in an awkward position as well. The Colossal threatened very heavily, so he's maybe going for Max Guard and then also reposition, take the Dragapult out to get something to help a little bit better against the Metagross at the moment.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right there, Lee. Shutting down that Dragapult to stop a potential Surf, then activating the Steam Engine on the next turn really was a good play here by James, because of course Colossal going to be threatened by the Metagross. Rillaboom going to join the field though, going to set around the grassy terrain though, as Colossal does indeed go for that Max Guard you mentioned earlier, Lee, and I think this is quite wise here. You know, Metagross going for that potential Max Quake, but instead James really into this and actually targets down into the Rillaboom. So Rillaboom going to be able to take that really easily. You know, it's not a Dragapult there anymore, but I think critically for James, he is getting these special defense boosts up so that the damage coming out from this Colossal is going to be minimal. You know, Spore going into that slot potentially would have been able to put it to sleep, but either way the defense is coming up on this Metagross, and you know, you want to be able to hit Metagross with a really hard fire type attack, but if it's got +2 special defense, then it's going to be able to take those much better, particularly in Dynamax.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think with the Amoonguss redirection as well, further supporting it, we are actually going to see the effects of the G-Max Volcalith come into effect here and remove the Amoonguss from the field. But this, again, just gives James the opportunity to bring something in to help better support the Metagross. And as you can see, the Incineroar coming in perfectly timed on that opposing Rillaboom that, you know, would rely more on its physical attacks to come in and provide fake-out support as well if the Rillaboom doesn't have it. But the Metagross in an extremely good position still to pick up the knockout on the Colossal, and we'll probably maybe see that this next turn if Jake doesn't decide to switch it out.
Well, again, Incineroar, a familiar face from many a Pokemon battle before, joining the field, and like you said, perfect timing, intimidating that Rillaboom, having that potential fake up pressure on the field as well, just gives James a little bit of maneuverability. Jake going to be able to switch in the Dragapult though, as Incineroar goes for the fake out, targeting down the Rillaboom, so good targeting down James's part, leaving Metagross free to go for another Max Quake, and it's going to go into the Dragapult that just switched in place for the Colossal. So Jake really preserving Colossal, knowing that he wants to keep it for later on in the game. Obviously, it will now lose its weakness policy boost, so often kind of a risk to switch out a Pokemon that has such an advantage, but potentially Jake wants to try and get a position up where maybe he can activate the Steam Engine instead and still deal some good damage while the Volcalith starts chipping away through James's Pokemon. But the grassy terrain actually kind of going against Jake here in the sense that, you know, the Pokemon are taking Volcalith, but that activates before grassy terrain, so they're able to just heal that damage back up a little bit.
Yeah, it is kind of counterintuitive a little bit, but obviously I don't think he probably expected the game to play out as it has done yet, and James to kind of get set up as well as he has. The Reflector on Jake's side of the field, very pivotal here. It's meant that a lot of his Pokemon are able to come in and out and stall out these Dynamax turns from the Metagross. Now the Metagross has got a lot of benefit from those Dynamax turns. It's boosted its special defense through the roof, so it's +3 now, which means that if the Colossal does make a return to the field, it's not going to be really threatening like it was previously, and it also benefits the Incineroar that's come onto the field as well for one turn. Now the Dragapult being asleep is another key to this, I think, and the sooner you remove that, the sooner you remove the threat that can potentially set up that Colossal. Although it's at such low health now, I don't know if it's at the point where you'd want to surf it, especially when you can't Dynamax it anymore.
Yeah, that's very true. Surf could be the end potentially for that Colossal, but you'll be delightedly. James has brought the Moltres out onto the field. Rillaboom going to go for that U-turn, targeting down into the Metagross, and I do really like sort of the change that James has gone for here, removing that Incineroar so it's free to come back in later and intimidate, use Fake Out, and bringing the Moltres here on the field where it can go for some dark type moves, potentially trying to pick up a KO against that Dragapult. Metagross, however, going for the Ice Punch into what was the Rillaboom. Colossal, of course, easily going to be able to take that, but again, that's good information for us to know that, you know, Ice Punch is there on that Metagross. It has a way of really dealing some good damage to this Dragapult too, if it comes down to it.
Yeah, and then you can see the residual damage from these G-Max Volcalith still chipping away at these Pokemon, helping out the Metagross a little bit here. And the Colossal now returning to the field, and if this Dragapult potentially wakes up this turn, it could go for the Surf, you think, but I do think it'd be very risky knowing how low that health is on the Colossal. And normally when you see it hit that Pokemon to get the Steam Engine boost, it would be in its Dynamax form a lot more defensively built and able to take that hit, whereas right now I don't feel like it's in the position to do that. You need Dragapult to wake up to threaten the Metagross, but it's in an awkward position against the Dark type Moltres that's just come onto the field.
Yeah, and it doesn't wake up. Fiery Wrath going to come out from the Moltres and actually revealing the Culber Berry there on the Dragapult. So not going to take as much damage from that Dark type attack as it previously would have. And, you know, such a beautiful animation from that Moltres. The double target attack really can be pivotal in so many games. Ice Punch coming out, though, from the Metagross, doubling up into that Dragapult. And I think you're right, Lee, when you've spoken about kind of the fear that James might have of this late game Colossal and Dragapult situation. You know, Colossal can still apply some good damage with the rock type moves into something like the Moltres. So if you're James, you just want to stop it from getting that speed advantage with Steam Engine and remove the Dragapult from play. But again, here's another Pokemon we've seen a lot of before, but haven't so much in today's broadcast. It's Urshifu on the field.
Yeah, and this is the perfect Pokemon for Jake to come in right now. It's not in a great position against the Moltres, in particular because of the threat of the flying type attacks that it does have there, but it puts enough pressure on the Metagross to make James actually have to think about it. Does he keep it on the field and allow it to go down? Does he allow that trade? Because if you're Urshifu, you target the Metagross, and then Colossal targets the Moltres. Moltres forced to target the Urshifu, so the trade probably becomes a little bit better for Jake here in the end if this is allowed to go through.
Yes, and it is indeed the Rapid Strike Urshifu there, targeting down into the Metagross, getting some critical hits, of course, and going to be able to nearly pick up the KO, but Metagross able to hang on 10 HP, but such a miss going on there. Stomping Tantrum coming out from the Metagross, going to target down into the Colossal and just remove it from play. I mean, one intense turn that's going on there, lots of damage being dealt, of course, Grassy Terrain can activate, but I love the way you flowcharted that out there, Lee, and there was quite a clear kind of path for our trainers to go down in order to play out that turn.
Yeah, and I honestly, I'm surprised that the Metagross, I know it's a very defensively built Pokemon, but I'm surprised it survived the attacks from Urshifu there. I think that was a very pivotal turn there for James, especially, and shows how well he's trained his Pokemon to take that attack and allow him the opportunity. The Hurricane Miss, very unfortunate there, and it does slightly let Jake back into this game once again.
I mean, that's the thing with the Moltres. I think you mentioned it earlier. Quite often it likes to be the sort of Dynamax Pokemon because it can get the extra bulk, it can have the weakness policy. And of course, if you turn a flying type move into a max move, it has that 100% accuracy. And something like Hurricane, unless it's raining, can sometimes be a little bit of a roll of the dice to whether or not it's going to be able to hit. Whereas obviously when it's in its max form, you get that 100% accuracy. But I wonder if James is going to be a little bit luckier going into this next turn. Rillaboom, first of all, going for that Grassy Glide, getting the priority while Grassy Terrain is in effect, and actually activates Moltres' Berserk. So gonna have that special attack boost going into the rest of this turn. Urshifu gonna go for that Surging Strikes, and it has targeted down into the Moltres on this turn, which is the Pokemon target it needed. Obviously, we're going to get all these critical hits, but is it going to be enough? Going for the third one, it is enough to pick up the KO against that Moltres. So Jake can breathe a sigh of relief, doesn't have to worry about a Berserk Moltres on the loose in this match. Metagross, however, going to follow up with that Zen Headbutt and misses the Urshifu. This is one nimble Urshifu, Lee.
That's two turns where James has used lower accuracy attacks, and they've both been very punishing here. Very unfortunate from that Zen Headbutt there may have been enough. I don't think it would have been enough to take it down, but the damage would have been invaluable going into this next turn, especially to play out this game with Incineroar coming onto the field where you've got access to a potential fake out now, and you can double in on that Urshifu again. And then Incineroar 1v1 versus Rillaboom most of the time can kind of deal with that threat there, but it's all playing out in my head at the minute. It's going to be interesting to see how the players deal with this right now. There is the immediate threat of fake out, and where does James go with it?
Well, Urshifu just going to detect up here, just playing a little bit defensively. Maybe needs to refocus so it can get its sort of dodging continuously through this game. Rillaboom, however, going to be to pick up the KO against that Metagross, going to be returning to James as Incineroar does go for the Flare Blitz, targeting down into this Rillaboom. Doesn't quite do enough to pick up the KO, does a huge amount of damage, and of course will take some in recoil as well. And, you know, if you're James, you're now putting your Incineroar in such a precarious position. We know that it is the Rapid Strike variant of the Urshifu as well, and that's going to be able to deal some super effective damage to the Incineroar.
Yeah, even on -1, the attacks that drop doesn't really matter here when you're talking about Surging Strikes and their critical hit rate. It will be able to remove the Incineroar pretty quickly from the field, and Jake going to be easy enough to take game one, which a little bit unfortunate from James. He's had two big misses there that could have otherwise maybe put this game in his favour, but very well played from Jake. It was very difficult for him to get the most out of the Colossal here. I think that was the biggest problem when we saw how James led in this match and shut down the Dragapult with the Spore from the Amoonguss, and then from there it was very difficult to really get any sort of advantage from that point. He did well to get it as close as he did, and yeah, just a very, very close game going into this first one here.
Yeah, so let's jump into the next game and see how things might change up in the next part of the match. Of course, Metagross was so key. Whether it's going to be able to keep the momentum strong there for James, we will have to see. And, you know, Jake sticking to the same strategy. We have got the Colossal and the Dragapult, whereas James has gone for the same thing as well. We've got the Metagross out in the field with the Amoonguss, and once again, you have this mind game of what is the Amoonguss going to do? What is the Colossal going to do? And now, you know, the third mind game, what is the Dragapult going to do? Are we going to see a Reflect again, just like game one? Or are we going to see that classic combination of Surf followed up by a really powerful move from the Colossal with the Steam Engine activated and the Weakness Policy?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Jake does here. Does he go for that Surf here and just try and remove the Amoonguss? Because if he gets the Surf off here, it means that he gets an attack off before the Metagross can actually get that special defense boost, which was so pivotal in game one. But at the same time, if you do that, then you are prone to getting knocked out by the Metagross because you no longer will have that Reflect up. So it's a very difficult decision to make, but the trade-off would be extremely useful, I think, in how game one turned out for both players.
Well, Colossal going to jump off the field, replaced by the Rillaboom. Again, a Pokemon that isn't going to be affected by a potential Spore from that Amoonguss. Dragapult is going to be hanging around as James does go for the Dynamax. So once again, the Metagross is going to be taking to the stage and can be applying a lot of pressure with something like the Max Quake starting to build up the special defense in the face of that Colossal. But as Colossal's no longer there and sort of facing down against this Rillaboom now as well, this is where things get a little bit interesting. Again, Rillaboom, not a Pokemon well known for being able to take down a Metagross. Amoonguss going to go for a Protect though, just going to save itself from taking any potential Volcalith or Max Flares from the Colossal. As Dragapult disappears, this Dragapult, honestly, we cannot call it at the moment, Lee, what it's going to do. And going for that Phantom Force, just going to disappear as Metagross goes for the Max Quake, targeting down into the Rillaboom that's able to take that much better than the Colossal did in game one. So really good switch there by Jake. He now also has the potential to go for a fake out into that Amoonguss in the next turn and stop it going for a potential Spore, for example. So good switch there, but I'm not too sure where he's going to go from here.
Yeah, I mean, for one turn, it's great. You get the Dragapult off the field. You potentially avoid a Dynamax turn, so you can see the logic behind it here. But Jim's not really falling for it just because of the threat of the Colossal there. It's a nice switch into Rillaboom, though, to take that Dynamax move, but with the same problem where the Metagross is getting these special defense boosts, which is making it a little bit more, like, increasingly stronger for when that Colossal does come back on the field. The difference here is that Jake hasn't Dynamaxed yet. He's kind of keeping that in the bag for later on, so it'll be interesting to see which Pokemon he does decide to go with here.
Well, Dragapult rejoining the field and going for the Phantom Force into the Amoonguss. And Amoonguss actually taking a double hit from the Rillaboom as well, going for the U-turn. So as Dragapult appears, Rillaboom disappears back into its Pokeball, leaving Jake free to keep switching up his ball position. And Colossal is actually going to return to the fold here. Metagross going for that Max Steel Spike, so changing up the defenses, this time focusing on boosting the defense stat. Still does over 50% to that Colossal. Of course, it's not in its Gigantamax phase like it was in game one. This is going to be really sort of big damage coming out from the Metagross. And Amoonguss this time going for the Spore, putting that Dragapult right back to sleep. So Colossal, even though it has joined the field, it can't be helped out by the Dragapult in the next turn, going for something like a Surf. And even if Metagross wanted to activate the Weakness Policy on that Colossal with a Max Quake, the dwindled HP on that Colossal means it's very likely just to get the KO.
Yeah, James really doing all the correct things here to make it nearly impossible for Jake to take advantage of this Colossal. He's putting the pressure on at the right times with the Metagross. He's got the Amoonguss supporting and really being disruptive. That Dragapult now taking out the game again. We saw how pivotal that was in game one. Just putting that to sleep means that you're not going to be able to support the Colossal as well as you need to. So yeah, it's a very difficult position again for Jake, but we saw him turn it around in game one, so maybe he can still do the same in game two, and he's doing well at stalling these Dynamax turns out.
Well, Metagross going for the Max Hailstorm, targeting down into this Dragapult, and I really like this play here by James because obviously it's going to deal super effective damage to the Dragapult. It's also going to deal phenomenal damage to the Rillaboom if it was potentially going to switch in, and I feel like Metagross is kind of proving a point to me where I said, you know, it's got this kind of awkwardness against a Rillaboom, but having something like Max Hailstorm just is going to stop Rillaboom even being a threat in this situation. Hails up as well, so residual damage is once again in play, chipping away at the Pokemon going to be affected by the hail. Of course, grassy terrain also on the field, trying to negate that a little bit more. So it's kind of interesting that, particularly when you look at the whole mix of Pokemon here, we've got some that really like to inflict that residual damage with, you know, either setting Weather or setting something like Volcalith up.
Yeah, and you know that the residual damage is very important. It's very key in a lot of these games. In the Volcalith, we saw how important it was in that first game here. So it's quite pivotal, I feel, with the importance that you're kind of putting onto it here, Lou. And I think you're completely correct. I think it's important that Jake tries everything in his power to get that off with the Colossal here. It's not in the greatest position, but he does have the Rillaboom in the back that he could bring in now and provide some sort of fake out support. And the Amoonguss is not in as healthy a position as it previously was in that game one, where we saw it take that big weakness policy boosted attack. The weakness policy isn't boosted, but we do see the Rillaboom come out, and it does provide a nice role here to support the Colossal in a different way to what the Dragapult did. But I think you're completely right with the residual damage is so imperative to how some of these teams are running, especially Jake's.
I think as well that Metagross is playing a slightly different game. You know, it doesn't have its Dynamax anymore. It can be hit by a fake out from the opposing Rillaboom, leaving Colossal free to go for some damage into it. And this time Metagross has only been able to set up one Max Quake special defense boost on its side of the field. So something coming out from that Colossal could still hit quite hard. And Jake does still have access to his Dynamax or Gigantamax if you want to go down the route of Colossal. So that is something that James still has to play around and contend with. And Jake's going for it here. This kind of late game Dynamax situation, and he's got 2 Pokemon that he could quite wisely choose from here, and it's actually going to be that Colossal. So deciding to opt for either going for that Volcalith, trying to set up that residual damage and keep chipping away, or maybe this is where, if you're Jake, you want to go for something like that Max Flare, set up the Sun and try and keep your moves even more powerful. Sun boosted fire type moves are going to be so strong. High horsepower coming out though from that Rillaboom. No fake out, taking it down to below 50%. Metagross going to go for the Ice Punch in retaliation into the Rillaboom. Again, not enough to pick up the KO, as Colossal does go for the G-Max Volcalith, targeting down into that Amoonguss. Not, however, going to be enough to pick up the KO in Amoonguss. We didn't see it go for any redirection. Very likely going to be going for a Spore here and targeting down into that Colossal. And that's so unfortunate there for Jake. Colossal's just managed to get itself into its prime position. It's set up the rocks, but now it is taking a little bit of a nap.
Yeah, and you can see without the weakness policy boost and the defense, the special defensive boosts that Amoonguss has gained through the Metagross's Dynamax turns, it's so pivotal in allowing it to get that Spore off, and that really shuts down the Colossal for the rest of maybe its Dynamax turns, which is so big for James here. And James still using his first 2 Pokemon, and it's sitting in a very good position. Now the Amoonguss will go down here, unfortunately, but it has done everything it needed to do in this match. It's supported so well, and it's doing it in style, really.
Yeah, Amoonguss has put in such an effort in that game, and putting the Colossal to sleep. Like we said, Colossal isn't as big of a threat, without the weakness policy boost, but the critical thing here as well is you're wasting Jake's Dynamax turns. That Colossal is guaranteed to now take 1 turn of sleep, so you can very safely either target it down or you can leave it alone depending on your strategy. And James actually bringing out the Comfey here. Really interesting choice.
Yeah, very interesting choice, and gives him a lot of options here. Potentially setting up Trick Room could be an option here for him to do, and it's got a lot of support options like Floral Healing that could be very problematic, for Jake to deal with. The Floral Healing especially very beneficial for the Metagross right now, that's taking a little bit of damage, but with all those defense boosts, you want to try and keep it on the field for as long as possible, and the Comfey, I feel, allows you to do that.
Yeah, Jake switching things around, going to reveal his 4th and final Pokemon, going to be that Urshifu once again. As Comfey does indeed go for that Floral Healing, going to be able to boost up the HP again of that Metagross, really going to help it out and give its longevity here on the field. Take it up to basically full HP there, but heartbreak again for this Metagross. It got its HP back, but it hasn't quite checked its accuracy, avoids the Urshifu on the switch in. And again, I really like that play from James. We know that the Ice Punch would have done really great damage to the Rillaboom, but so would the Zen Headbutt there. That would have also done huge damage to the Rillaboom, and if you caught the Urshifu on the switch in, as what could have happened, that could again have picked up so much damage. But this poor Metagross, it needs to check its accuracy a little bit.
Definitely needs to. It hasn't hit one of these Zen Headbutts yet, and they're very pivotal because obviously a nice play there from James. Like you say, could have went for the Ice Punch there quite easily, but predicting maybe the Urshifu to come in, wanted to just get good damage onto the Rillaboom if it stayed out on the field, but really punish an Urshifu switch, which would make sense at this point, and that's what he did. And unfortunately, again, another miss, really unfortunate. And the Colossal staying asleep again. Whether it wakes up this next turn is going to be another question. The Metagross in a decent position though to potentially go for a Stomp and Tantrum into it and try and remove it, but you've got to be cautious, because if you do and don't pick up the knockout, you will potentially proc that activate the weakness policy, which then could be very detrimental for you in the rest of this game.
Yeah, so Urshifu going to leave the field, just doesn't want to fall victim to one of the Zen Headbutts, maybe doesn't trust that, third time wouldn't be the charm for that Metagross going for the Zen Headbutts. And it also allows Rillaboom to come back in and set the Grassy Surge up on the field, allowing it its priority for Grassy Glide if it so wants to go for that. The Comfey, however, is going to go for the Helping Hand, and I really like this play because it touches on the excellent point that you made, Lee. If Stomping Tantrum is not enough, then you activate the weakness policy on that Colossal. So going for the Helping Hand guarantees the knockout there, and you can see Colossal bursting up into flame. It has been removed. That really big threat to James's team has now just been completely alleviated. And James as well, again, looking in such a strong position. Comfey still relatively healthy. It could go for another Floral Healing on Metagross if it so needs it. And we know that Metagross has the utility to pick up KOs against both the Rillaboom and the Urshifu.
Yeah, and that's the big thing here. And also with the Comfey, an interesting point to make is that it sometimes carries, and normally does carry, Trick Room, which could be a form of speed control that James could use to his advantage depending on what comes in next. You've got to imagine it will be the probably the Urshifu. I think it's in the healthiest kind of position at the moment and can maybe get some big damage onto the Metagross, which is really what you want to try and do if you are Jake. The Metagross is so set up well with these defense boosts that it's already got, and it's got a great coverage where it's hitting most things for super effective damage.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, that Comfy, it's going to be problematic. You know, being able to hit the Urshifu with some fairy type moves as well, they're going to be dealing super effective damage. And Urshifu definitely is a Pokemon that doesn't like to take those kind of moves at all. And being the Rapid Strike variant, not the Single Strike variant, means it won't have access to those really powerful Dark type moves that Metagross would normally try and shy away from. Metagross, however, going to get a little bit more love from the Comfey there. Going to go for the Floral Healing and take it right back up to full HP, as Rillaboom does indeed go for that Grassy Glide, going straight into the Metagross, does a little bit of damage as Urshifu follows up with the Surging Strikes once again. So 3 of these Water type moves going to connect into that Metagross. Obviously a critical hit on each of them, but as you can see by the damage coming out, Metagross is easily going to be able to survive this, and you can see how this turn's going to keep playing out. Metagross is able to now go for a move, and in the next turn Comfey can just go for Floral Healing again because it has that priority, allowing Metagross to stay out on the field and kind of close out this game for James.
Yeah, it's a very, very well played and methodical way to do this. You know, he's taking his time at every kind of step. And like you mentioned there, the Comfey in a great position as well. Something I didn't mention before, but you have, thankfully, Lou, that it is there to help deal with the Urshifu in maybe a spot where it could be a little bit problematic. The Floral Healing, though, from it, providing support to the Metagross is incredibly strong. And now down to just the Urshifu to deal with. I don't think James is going to have too much trouble in dealing and kind of closing this match out.
Exactly. The combination actually of Comfey and Metagross is really delightful to see. You know, often Comfey's against a Metagross, and Metagross is able to deal some really good damage with the Steel type move, for example. So it's quite nice to see them working in harmony together on James's side of the field. Again, seeing that Floral Healing going to be boosting up the HP of that Metagross as Urshifu goes for those Surging Strikes. This time, however, it's not a double up with the Grassy Glide from the Rillaboom. So I was going to say Metagross would easily be able to survive, but Comfey is going to be the target. And is Comfey itself actually going to be able to survive, hanging on by 1 HP? I mean, with all the residual effects on the field, you know, with the Volcalith, probably not going to be able to survive out the turn, but finally Urshifu manages to find a connect. Oh, sorry, the Metagross finds a connect on the Urshifu there. And of course, grassy terrain going to help out a little bit too. So lots of residual things going on here, Lee.
Yeah, lots going on at the end of the turn, but the Zen Headbutt finally hitting for James is probably a big relief for him. He was probably worried if it misses there, then this game could get still quite tricky. The Urshifu's faster than everything that he's got on the field at the moment, but now with that Zen Headbutt damage, the Comfey able to easily pick up the knockout with something like Draining Kiss if it is running something like that.
As you said, Colossal was going to be the centerpiece of the match, or whether potentially Jake is going to shake things up. But no, Dragapult and Colossal are going to be sticking in it for Jake here as his strong leads. And do you know what? James going for what's been very effective for him as well, that Amoonguss and that Metagross. And once again, you know, Lee, you spoke about this a lot before Game 2 with these kind of mind games and what exactly this Dragapult is going to do. And we've got this Game 3 situation where Dragapult can go for anything again. It could go for that Surf, it could go for that Phantom Force, it could go for that Reflect. There's so many options here.
Yeah, and is this the turn that we're finally going to see the Surf come out? Maybe it is, I don't know. I think it's maybe worth trying if you're Jake to either remove the Metagross from the field or that Amoonguss. The problem is going for this play is if you target the Metagross in place of the Amoonguss and the Metagross maxes and goes for the Max Quake, you could potentially lose the Colossal. As well as that, you risk getting put to sleep from the Amoonguss, but we are going to see Jake just take a bit more of a conservative route this time around.
Well, this is certainly an interesting change, a Pokemon we haven't seen as of yet. Going to be the Cresselia jumping out on the field for Jake, a Pokemon known for its bulk and for some of the tricksy moves that it can get up to. James, however, going to stick with the same game plan, getting that Metagross into its Dynamax form and putting it into prime position to be going for something like a Max Quake or a Max Steel Spike in this situation. But of course, if you're quaking into that Cresselia, you might be in for a little bit of trouble. Amoonguss going for the Protect, though, just wants to preserve itself from taking any additional damage, and Dragapult once again going for the Phantom Force. Are going to disappear from the field and reappear in the next turn as Metagross does indeed go for the Max Quake, but Cresselia's Levitate going to just eat that up and wasting one of James's max turns.
Yeah, really nice play here from Jake. He's not revealed the Cresselia so far in this set, so bringing it to this game 3 is really nice play. Knowing that James is almost forced to go for a Max Quake and taking advantage of that to waste the potential move of this Dynamax Metagross and prevent that special defense boost as well.
Exactly, and Cresselia actually going to Dynamax. You know, we just touched on how bulky it is as a Pokemon. Well, how about we double its HP and then really see how bulky it is? And of course, it's a Pokemon that, depending on the moves that it's got, can really alter things like terrain and weather as well. So it can certainly give James a few options to go for. Amoonguss going to have to take the Phantom Force though, as Dragapult reappears on the field. But Metagross is going to go for that Max Hailstorm and going to punish the Dragapult for daring to return to the match and able to pick up a KO against it. Once again, James ensuring that Colossal doesn't have its partner Pokemon that it loves to have in order to get itself set up, removes it straight away from the field. Gets the critical hit, of course, as well. I'm not too sure if that mattered or not on this occasion, as Cresselia goes for that Max Mindstorm. So going to target down into the Amoonguss is enough to pick up the KO, particularly with the chip from Phantom Force, and just removes that pesky Pokemon for Jake's side of the field. You know, we've seen Amoonguss in games 1 and 2 keep putting the Dragapult to sleep, putting the Colossal to sleep. Now Jake doesn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and that's a big play there for Jake, and definitely the Cresselia, not something that I thought I'd see go for the Dynamax here, especially when you're relying so much on something like the Colossal. It's an interesting Pokemon to max, but it's paid off really well for Jake here. He's removed what was one of the biggest problems for him in game 1 and 2, as we are going to be seeing the Urshifu hit the field now in place of that Dragapult.
Well, this is where it's quite good for James to have brought the Comfey here onto the field as well, because Comfey, we know, can threaten the Urshifu with some sort of fairy-type moves. You know, the Draining Kiss in particular, going to be able to apply a lot of pressure. And Metagross in its Dynamax form isn't going to worry too much about those critical hits from Surging Strikes from Urshifu. And my big question now, if you're James, is how on earth are you going to deal with this Cresselia? What have you got to take it down?
Yeah, you know, at the best of times, it's a very defensively built Pokemon, so it's very difficult to take when it's not Dynamaxed. But when it is Dynamaxed, it's incredibly difficult. It's going to be even double the difficulty to take down, and I don't feel like James has really got the attacking pressure on the field at the moment to deal with it. Maybe he has something in the back that could come in and start putting on that pressure. Maybe something like that Galarian Moltres, we know he's running. That would be a good option to bring in against the Cresselia, but you still want to kind of try and run out these Dynamax turns that we're seeing here.
Of course, though, the Psychic Terrain in effect going to stop that priority Draining Kiss that the Comfey does get. So, you know, really nice mechanic here from the Cresselia, really kind of protecting its partner Pokemon, setting up that terrain and stopping the Urshifu from falling victim to that Draining Kiss. Not something that I'd picked up on there, so great to see the turn coming out. Cresselia once again going for that Max Mindstorm, going to target down into that Comfey. Does do a lot of damage, of course. Cresselia being Levitate, not going to be able to get the boost from the Psychic Terrain that it would so deeply want to be able to get that additional damage, but I still think it's putting in a lot of work as a Dynamax Pokemon here, Lee.
Yeah, it's doing a really good job at the moment. Like you say, with the Psychic Terrain, really useful against the Comfey to kind of just protect your Urshifu. That's going to be one of the most important things for you to try and help close this game out against James. Jack needs to be very careful at this point. He's not really got the damage output, like you say. He misses that boost from the Psychic Terrain with the Cresselia because it has got that levitating ability, but maybe a double up from the Urshifu right now, and also then the Max Mindstorm from the Cresselia would help deal with that. You've got to still be wary about the Zen Headbutts now from the Metagross and James's side of the field, because they'll be getting boosted now with this Psychic Terrain.
That is very true. As long as, of course, as Metagross is able to connect them. I think it's 1 for 3 for the Zen Headbutt. Urshifu going for those Surging Strikes, though, however, going to be targeting down into the opposing Metagross. We know from the HP, having seen this a couple of times before in Game 2, Metagross is going to be able to survive this, and it's also, I believe that was helping hand boosted from the Comfey. Metagross going for the Zen Headbutt, but it is able to connect this time, so James, I'm sure, is very delighted to be able to see that happen. But Urshifu revealing itself to have that focus sash, so James needs to be able to find a way to target down into it again. Max Mindstorm going to come out into the Comfey again, not going to be able to pick up a KO, and this is the kind of situation I think where James would have liked to have that Draining Kiss, but having previously set up the Hail with the Metagross earlier on, doesn't have to worry about that Urshifu, and I think that's a really good sort of calculation that James had there, knowing that, you know, going to be hitting the Focus Sash, but the Hail's going to be able to pick up the KO, and now I have limited Jake to just his Cresselia, and Dynamax is over.
Yeah, and Cresselia, one of those Pokemon more known for its supporting roles rather than its offensive roles, and it did a really good job in this match, but not quite enough. Now, Jake, we did mention, probably had to look for a different route with how he was going to approach this game. Unfortunately, I think James has just got the Pokemon to help deal with most situations here and make it very difficult for Jake to shut things down, as we see the Moltres now make its way onto the field finally to sup up the Psychic that's just come out from the Cresselia.
Yeah, of course, Dark-type Pokemon not going to worry about any Psychic-type moves coming their way, and being able to go for Dark-type moves into Psychic-type Pokemon is exactly what Moltres loves to do now that it's got its brand new typing. And actually just going to hold back a little bit, going to go for that Taunt, going to stop the Cresselia for going for any potential sort of status moves that we know it likes to have. Iron Head going to be getting a critical hit as well. James really coming out so dominant and strong here towards the end of this game 3. Cresselia just going to eat its berry as well, going to regain a little bit of HP. But Cresselia can't use the Calm Mind, so a really good taunt there coming out from the Moltres. Of course, Calm Mind could potentially have put Cresselia in a position boosting up its special defense and its special attack, particularly the defense, I suppose, to try and deal with that Moltres a little bit more. But in all honesty, the moment Moltres comes out, I think Cresselia might be quaking a little bit, and looks like Jake has locked in the forfeit.